Hey, what's up, everybody? It's just Charleston, and welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. Today, we have an interesting episode for you guys that you definitely don't want to miss because we're going to have some drama in it. So make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. So, y'all, listen, you can tell already that this Lakers season next season is going to be full of drama. Oh, it is crystal clear to see. The signs are there. As they say, the writing is on the wall. Last year's Lakers team underachieved like few teams have ever underachieved in professional sports. Not just in the NBA, in professional sports. Going into that season, that Lakers, think about this, that Lakers team had 5 Hall of Famers, and 4 top 75 players. They went into that season as the favorites to represent the Western Conference. By the end of the season, they couldn't even make it into the bloody play-in tournament. And to add insult to injury, they fired their former coach in a very classless way, which caused a lot of people like Reggie Miller and others to call out the organization. And to top it all off, the players were full of nothing but excuses. Nothing but excuses. And the number one thing that they blamed it on was injuries. They blamed their failures on injuries. Meanwhile, right across the corridor, the Clippers made the playoffs. Literally, they made it into the playoffs, at least a play-in, whatever you want to call it, but they were the 8th seed, so they were a playoff. They were top 8 seed. Without Kawhi Leonard not playing a single game and Paul George missing about 75% of the season. So how did they do it? You go figure, right? Y'all let me know how that happened. How did they do it? If it's injuries, so how did they make it, right? So that was what was said. So the Lakers are out there saying a bunch of delusional stuff. And by far their most delusional player was Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook was supposed to be the piece that put the Lakers over the top last season. As y'all remember, they were picked to be the favorites to represent the Western Conference. But ultimately, and obviously, it didn't work out. He came under heavy criticism, Westbrook, we're talking about last season, because of the way he played. Because of the way he played, Russell Westbrook was terrible last season in stretches, right? And there were even various points in the season where they said, listen, should the Lakers consider bringing Russell Westbrook off the bench? And a lot of people said that if they opted to make that decision, they would ultimately lose him. Now, let's fast forward to the present moment here. The Lakers were doing a press conference, I believe it was yesterday, introducing their new head coach in Darvin Ham, which all of you are aware of. And he was asked about the possibility of Russell Westbrook coming off the bench or taking a lesser role. So what we want to do is we want to play a little bit of the audio of the reporter asking him the question, and I want you guys to take a listen to his response. Take a listen to that.
Specifically on Russ, a lot has been made about his fit with LeBron, and we didn't see it a ton last year with injuries, but how do you see those three working together? How do you see Russ fitting? And I guess you do see him here, I guess, based on the way you're talking.
Absolutely. I mean, just our running habits. And Russell, don't get it messed up. Russ is one of the best players our league has ever seen. And there's still a ton left in that tank. I don't know why people tend to try to write him off. I'm going to approach him like I do every player I've ever encountered. We're going to talk about our running habits with the ball, without the ball. And again, the team, the rhythm of the team, and trying to establish a rhythm with LeBron, Russ, AD, and again, share the load defensively and offensively. Defensively is where you're going to see us make our biggest leaps and bounds. We have to commit to the defensive side of the ball, or we don't have a chance to do anything. The offense won't even matter if we don't get stops.
Have you spoken to Russ Westbrook? And 2, has there been any discussion among you guys about maybe a change in role for him, maybe coming off the bench? And for Rob, after what you saw last season, talking to Darvin, what made you think, this is a workable situation with Westbrook?
Yeah, I would say yes. Russ and I have had some really, really great one-on-one convos, man. And the biggest word I think came out of those discussions were sacrifice. That was the biggest word. It was sacrifice. We're going to sacrifice whatever we got to do. And it's not just Russ. There's going to be sacrifices that LeBron has to make, that AD has to make, on down the line through the rest of our roster. Again, we have to start on the defensive end. And in terms of what his role is going to be, I'm going to expect him to be the same tenacious, high-energy player that he's been on his entire career. A lot of it now may happen without the ball in his hand. Most of it now may happen on the defensive end. But again, we have to sacrifice. There's no achieving anything without all parties, sharing the load, sacrificing, and depending on one another.
According to a report from Michael J. Duarte via sportsrush.com, Westbrook actually laughed at that notion. Let me read what the reporter had to say on Twitter. He said, Dylan Hernandez asked if Russell Westbrook might come off the bench next season, and Westbrook turned to his teammates, HBK and Wenyen, and laughed. Ham said he's spoken with Russ and preached sacrifice. So Russell Westbrook basically laughed at the idea of him coming off the bench because he was there, right? He was there. Now, let me tell you why I think this entire story is disturbing. Let me tell you guys why. If you listen to him talk about Russell Westbrook and talk about the team in general, he talked about the team developing a defensive identity. He spoke about the importance of the team, coming together on the defensive side of the floor. As it pertains to Russell Westbrook, apart from the fact that he said he's one of the greatest players, blah, 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 he said that Russell Westbrook really needs to take on the challenge of being a defensive force like he used to. Okay, wait a minute. When was Russell Westbrook ever a defensive force? When was Russell Westbrook ever accused of being one of the top two-way players in basketball? When was that? Do y'all know that in Russell Westbrook's career, illustrious career, I might add, he has never not even made a defensive team, not even one time, not even an all-third defensive team. He's never made an all-defensive team. So how is Russell Westbrook at the age of 33, 34, whatever it is, all of a sudden going to change stripes? How is he going to do it? How is he all of a sudden going to become this defensive player to be the first line of defense? How's that going to happen? He's never done it before. That's the first thing. That's the first thing that gave me cause to pause. Secondly, how are the Lakers supposed to solve their defensive issues with the exact same roster at hand? How are they going to do it? What's the magic trick that I'm missing? Who's the one pulling the bunny out of the hat? How are they going to do it? The Lakers last year were not a good defensive team. Their issues lied on the defensive side of the floor. Had nothing to do with their scoring. Clippers scored less points per game than the Lakers, but the Clippers held opponents to less points per game than the Lakers, hence they had a better record. The Lakers gave up way more points than the Clippers on a night in and night out basis, and I think on average, they gave up more points to opponents than they were scoring. That was the issue. Their defense was terrible. So how are they going to address their defensive woes when you have the same roster? That's number one. Number two, how are you going to solve your spacing issues with the same lineup? Russell Westbrook can't shoot. You heard Patrick Beverley say the other day, no one can shoot on that roster, and it's true. They don't have any shooters. I would say their best shooters are Anthony Davis and LeBron. And if LeBron is your best shooter on your team, you're in trouble. LeBron is at his best when he's playing with shooters, not as the best shooter on the court. LeBron is not a great shooter. That's not his strength. And then you have Russell Westbrook in the starting line. So listen, let me tell you guys what I expect to happen next season if things continue in this direction and if the Lakers decide to make no moves. I think it's going to be more blaming. It's going to be more failure and more of a bunch of finger pointing. That's what we're heading to right now. You can already see it because they've changed the coach. They've changed the voice, but they still have the same players. And Darvin Ham kept on. If you listen to Rob Pelinka yesterday, he said the word he bringing up was sacrifice. Well, they're talking about sacrifice, and Russell Westbrook is chuckling it up, laughing it up. So to me, listen, I think them talking about sacrifice is rich, and it's hilarious.